Mark, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Doing very good. I'm very excited you agreed to come on the show. And for our listeners' sake, if you can bring us back to the time where you decided to become an entrepreneur and start your online business.
Oh boy. Well, that goes back to 2002. I started in the online world in 1997. I was in college. I built my first website. I'm thankful that it's one of the few things on the internet that's disappeared because it was pretty awful. But right out of college, I worked for an internet company out in Baltimore, Maryland, and I learned I learned really quickly just how volatile this space is. I still remember I walked into the office one day. We had about 30 people in my division. I was an account manager. We had about 30 people in my division, and all of a sudden, it was a Monday morning. I saw everybody going in to talk to our supervisor and learned that our division went from 30 people down to 3. And I was one of the 3 people left. I went from having 3 clients or 4 clients maybe up to 220 in a day.
Cow.
Yeah, and then on top of that, as kind of the great benefit, I got to tell all of my new 220 clients who I had no relationship with that we were going to double their prices immediately, which you can imagine how that went. Really trial by fire, but that was the early days of the internet and one of the very first big bubble bursts. But I didn't really start my entrepreneurial career until about 2 years later, and I got let go from that job. And kind of grew a distaste for the corporate world pretty quickly, and became what I like to call professionally unemployed.
I like it.
Which is just a way for me to explain what I do, because it's kind of difficult to explain to people at gatherings and stuff what you do. But from there, I started an online publication that focused on online or internet-based entrepreneurship. And I sold that in 2006 through another brokerage firm that specialized in internet-based acquisitions. And then about a year later, a good friend of mine, back from those days when I took on those 220 clients, one of those clients became a good friend of mine, and he decided to sell his business and asked if I wanted to help him. And that was kind of the start of Quiet Life Brokerage. It's something that I had played around with before, I had thought about before, but never really jumped into, and that was the opportunity to jump into it. And now it's been about 10 years. Actually, it'll be 10 years this fall since I started up Quiet Life Brokerage.
That's crazy how fast it goes. So when they fired those people, and they picked 3 people, you must have been one of the people that had the toughest skin that can just go take on 220 people and double their prices.
You know what? I was cheap. That's what it was. We were the 3 people that they kept were the recent college grads that had just started. And so, it was, oh my goodness, our company's bleeding money. We got to let go of a lot of people, and who can we keep? These guys don't cost a lot. Let's keep them.
That's a good strategy too, I bet.
I don't know. I mean, it was really crazy. That was quite the adventure. But I learned a ton. I mean, as hard as that experience was, I learned a lot, and I still have relationships from those days with some of those clients. I see some of them at conferences now, and we reminisce in almost like talking about our war stories of what that was like, because they didn't like it on their side, of course.
Well, I'm sure. So did they help you, going back to your the business that you started, it was 3 newsletters, correct? And you had almost 250,000 subscribers. So can you kind of give our listeners a little bit of a backdrop on how did you start it? What was the purpose behind it, and what drove it?
Boy, how I started it was a pivot from another business, and I'm not sure if we should go into all that. It gets kind of detailed and nuancy, but suffice it to say, I had another marketing-based business, which I had brought on a bunch of subscribers, and they were paying a monthly fee, but that business didn't work out, so I turned it into a freemium model. People could sign up for the service. It was automated, and I didn't really know what I was going to do with it. Now, this was back in the early 2000s when email marketing had a much different vibe and feel to it. And so what I did is I thought, well, I'm offering a service for free. Why don't I make a condition of it that you have to subscribe to this newsletter? And that's what I used to drive traffic or subscribers to this newsletter. And you're right. I think I maxed out around 225,000 subscribers to that newsletter. And we would publish, I think it was 10 articles per week. And we dealt with everything from how to appear higher in the search rankings to how do you do your taxes as an entrepreneur working from home. The model that I think is so foreign to a lot of traditional business owners from the online world is there's a bunch of people making money from their homes, and they're very good at making money on the internet, but they don't really have a lot of business acumen. And so we try to focus on a little bit of both and straddle that line between, what are some traditional business principles and what are some things that'll make you more successful online.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, because there's a lot of people that I've been slowly more and more exposed to your guys' world with my digital marketing, and it is kind of mind-boggling how much money these people are making with, very, green business acumen, and it's just an interesting observation that I've seen it as the worlds are kind of colliding, where, you all of a sudden you're making money and you can become, savvy in business if you've got the time and the resources. So it's not a bad situation to have. The question I got, for our listeners, and as we talk about the traditional businesses and the online businesses, I think the biggest question that everybody has is, okay, so if you got 220,000 subscribers and your newsletter's free, how do you sell that?
Well, I had sponsors, so I generated revenue through sponsorships of the newsletter. We had a website, we had a forum, we had the newsletter, and I had various ad slots. But the most popular thing was sponsorships within the newsletter or dedicated mailing to our list, where we would send it out co-branded. Hey, this is the name of the website was Site Reference. This is a Site Reference partner. Take a look at the offer that they have, and I would charge $2,000 or $3,000 for that mailing, and so I would have one of those go out per week. And so what I was really selling at that point in the acquisition was the content, but also the email list and the eyeballs. How many people are going to be seeing your message, and how do you monetize this? And there's a lot that you can do with that. I think a general philosophy that I had back then, and I still have to this day, although it's modified a little bit, is in the online world, if you have eyeballs, if you have an audience, you can make money.
So when what was a triggering event? If you're generating revenue and you've got, a significant subscriber list like this, what was the triggering event for you to sell it versus to continue to grow and expand your current user base?
I was naive.
That's a good answer.
I'm not sure if there's really much more of an honest answer than that. I was giving advice to people on how to be successful online, and there's a certain hubris that comes with it, where I thought, why don't I go off and take some of my own advice? It's a lot harder than it seems, evidently. So I sold it. I was a little bit bored with it. I'm an entrepreneur. I get shiny penny syndrome. And so I decided I was going to sell it, and I didn't have much of a plan afterwards. And that in itself is a story, because I sold it. I didn't sell it for that much money. I sold it for enough to really get me about a year worth of time. And my following projects didn't really take off like I had expected. But fortunately, Quiet Light Brokerage came around just in time.
Well, I think it's a cool story, because I heard a little bit of your podcast with Chris Yates, and you did something interesting over 12 months. And I think, a lot of your experience that you're giving entrepreneurs now comes from some of the things that you did, because you went back and you did a bunch of stuff over 12 months, correct? That allowed you to significantly increase the value of your business?
Well, so for that, no, I didn't actually increase the value of the business. What I did see is what I could have done to increase the value of that business. To give the listeners just a little bit of context, I sold the business for $165,000, but I know for a fact, and now especially today with the knowledge I have in online business valuations, that business should have been worth, if I had done a few things, it should have been worth over $350,000. And I know that the owner who bought it from me could have gotten that if he had wanted to from the business. And what the big mistake I made with Site Reference was it lacked any transferability. And this is a huge aspect. This is one of the things that makes internet businesses valuable, is the ability to transfer them over to anybody in the country or even internationally. But the problem with Site Reference is I was doing so much of the work. I was writing, I was editing, I was the sales guy, I was the programmer. I don't have a programming background, but I learned how to program so that I could build the websites and do everything else like that. I wore every single hat in that business, and that's a really difficult prospect to sell in an acquisition. Frankly, I got a really good price for it, given how much I was involved in the day to day. And if I were to go back, 12 years or 13 years, however long ago it was, and advise myself back then, I would have a lot of advice for myself as to how to increase the value of that business. But that's another reason, by the way, you asked why did I sell? The other reason that I sold is I couldn't figure out how to turn that corner. I couldn't figure out how to expand beyond myself. I was making enough money to support my family, but not enough money to invest in other people and take that short-term hit. At least that was my thought at the time.
So it's very interesting because that scenario, I think, is applicable to every entrepreneur. I don't care what business that they have. I don't know if you've heard of the book or read the book called the EMyth. This gentleman, Michael Gerber, talks about the technical individual versus the actual entrepreneur. And it's how do you remove yourself from the hub and spoke? I mean, and brick and mortar companies and online companies, it's interesting how they struggle from the same thing. As you're looking, the hindsight bias, but then all these companies that you're working with today, what are some of the things that you can do to turn the corner and to make that business more transferable?
Great question. And I wish I could say I have it completely figured out. I don't. I still struggle with this as well. And part of it's just the control nature of being an entrepreneur, right? You want to control all aspects. I think the first thing that you have to realize is that companies that have employees tend to make more money. I mean, this is a pretty basic statistic, but I went through recently for an article on our website on whether or not you should. It was geared towards people who are doing acquisitions. And a common question we get is, should I buy one big business or should I buy lots of smaller businesses, right? This is a common question. So I try to answer it through statistics. One of the things that I found, I went through and I looked at 20 of our past deals, is a direct correlation, a very, very strong correlation between the amount of cash flow a business generates and the number of employees that they have. And for your listeners, again, that might be more familiar with the brick and mortar world, in the online world, you can do a lot of things without employees. This is the big appeal of the online business world. I've had clients who are pulling in $500,000 in bottom line earnings, and they have themselves and a general contractor that works for them, maybe in the Philippines, right? That's not an uncommon scenario, but it's not necessarily a healthy scenario either. So I think, how do you make that transition? I think the first thing is you have to understand that investing in other people is a good thing for you. The second thing that I found that has really helped me, I forget what book I read this in, and maybe I can shoot you a link after so that you can share it with your subscribers, because it was a really good book. But it was a survey that went around to some of the most successful people to value what they find to be the most valuable assets. And the more successful the person, the more uniform the response was time. Time was their most valuable asset. And when I heard that, I was like, absolutely, that makes complete sense. It's the one thing that you cannot get back. If you spend money, you can make more, right? Mm-hmm. If you use an asset, you can usually replace it somehow. You can't replace time. Mm-hmm. And so understanding that time is your most valuable asset and investing in that is going to pay off. That's been a second thing. So a lot of what I've done has been mindset based.
Well, I think you hit it. Time is the most valuable asset, and whether it's traditional businesses or online businesses, it's all applicable because when I sit down with a business owner or our listeners are looking into their own situation, transferable value is the most important part, and that means having an asset that you can hand off to someone that is not a job. If you or I were to go buy, someone's business, I don't want another job, right? And that's kind of the conversation that we continue to focus in on, because if you don't, all these individuals, that $500,000 individual you're talking about, he's got himself a job. He doesn't have himself a business.
Right. Now, with a company that's making $500,000, there's still a lot of value there because the buyer can replace them with somebody else. Mm-hmm. But you're absolutely right. We talk about this all the time, especially with entrepreneurs who are making lower amounts of money. So the company that has $30,000 to $50,000 of net income and works 40 to 50 hours a week. Why would you want to buy that business? It doesn't make sense. You're buying a job that pays less than, frankly, most other jobs. And you're putting up your own money to do so. Yeah, transferable value is huge. And so figuring out ways to automate your business either through systems or through hiring is really the trick. And it really does come down to figuring out systems for both your contractors, employees, and any other automation you can put in place.
So with your with how you're analyzing businesses at your brokerage firm, and as you're working with other online businesses like this, so when you're looking at transferable value, Chris in the previous podcast had talked about you're applying a multiple and evaluation to these companies. So can you dive in and explain a little bit more about what are the different aspects that you're looking at? So let's say we've got the cash flow number and that it's accurate, and because we've done some due diligence, but what are different key drivers like the transferable or employees? Are there any other variables that'll impact how you're valuing that business?
Yeah, sure. So there's actually dozens upon dozens of factors that we look at. And I wrote a guide on this, which is on our website, called How Much Is My Website Worth? The Ultimate Guide to Website Value. And it's over 20,000 words of content where we go into all the different things that can impact value. Now, that's obviously somewhat overwhelming to look at that, right? And I wouldn't recommend going through and reading every little thing.
I can link to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Link to it. I mean, it's there as a resource for people. But what I generally talk about if I'm speaking at a conference or anytime I have a reference point is I'd like to put things into 4 generic buckets, 4 main drivers of that multiple or of the thing that would influence evaluation. And those 4 buckets would be the risk, the growth, the transferability, and the documentation that a business has. The risk being pretty obvious, right? What could kill your business or what could destroy your business? And in our world of websites, it's so much more pronounced. The risk is so much stronger than it is with a traditional brick and mortar business. If I have a website that's pulling in $100,000 today, but then all of a sudden it fails, I have nothing left to sell. I don't have physical assets to sell. And so it's a much higher risk sort of business. It's all goodwill, all blue skies sort of value. So risk is a very large motivating factor, and we can go into what things pose a specific risk to internet-based businesses. Growth, and I always emphasize, don't talk about the potential of the business. No one cares about the potential. Talk about the growth prospects, those things that are realistic to be able to achieve. And the best indicator of growth prospects is typically historical growth or recent growth for the business. That's the strongest growth prospect. Transferability, we already keyed on that a little bit. And that's how easy is it for somebody who doesn't know your business to come in and run the business from day one? What sort of learning curve are they going to have, and what sort of restrictions are they going to have, either geographic or licensing or otherwise? And then last, and this is the easiest thing for any entrepreneur to control and adds so much value to the business, people usually don't see it, is documentation. Have your books in order. Understand what your business is doing and be prepared for the documentation. You sold your business, right? And you know how much work is in due diligence. It's a pain, but you got to do it. You got to have the documentation, and the more that you keep it organized, the more value you're going to get. I sold somebody's business back in October, and she stood out as probably the most organized, seller I have ever worked with. And I talked to the buyer afterwards. I said, "How much help did that give you through this?" And he said, "Oh, it made such a difference." And this guy's bought multiple businesses, online and offline. He says, "It's made such a difference to have organized books. I felt like there was nothing hidden. She knew her stuff. She knew what was there, and I could trust her all throughout the process because she had her stuff together, which makes all the difference in the world."
I'm sure she got more money for it too.
She got a great deal. Yeah, she got a solid deal. We privately shopped that one to about 10 buyers. I had 2 people who were super interested, and we got definitely a top end sort of price. But the business was solid too. Somebody who's organized with their books is typically organized otherwise. And I talked to the buyer; he's doing really well with the business today as well, which makes me very happy.
Well, and you trust, man. You nailed it. And data equals trust. There was a gentleman on our show called Rob Nelson, and he owns a company called Grow. He had sold some businesses, and Grow is a business intelligence company now. And the amount of information that guy had ready to sell, he got his company sold in less than a month, because it's like, here it all is, and the trust factor immediately is expedited because you're not having to second guess every piece of information that you're getting.
Yeah, I tell people all the time that offers are made based off the metrics, but deals have to be closed on trust. If you don't trust the person you're working with, you're never going to get to the closing table. And there's lots of indicators of trust throughout the deal. And I think a good broker, a really good broker, understands that their job is to actually help really build a bank of trust on both sides. Documentation is right up there at the top. Have good, clean documentation, and don't surprise the person buying your business in a bad way.
Surprises are not good in due diligence.
No. I actually had somebody, a buyer, this was years ago. He called me and he said, I'm really concerned. I'm like, oh, well, what's wrong? He's like, these numbers aren't adding up. I'm like, oh, well, that's bad. I'm like, well, how are they not adding up? They've got like $50,000 more revenue than they're reporting. Isn't that a good thing? Like, so I guess so. But why are they wrong? I get what he's saying. He's wondering if they're wrong here, where else are they wrong?
Right. No.
Even though there was more revenue there, and that was a good thing, and he was getting a better deal, it still seeded that mistrust of these guys are kind of disorganized.
So for our listeners, and even for my benefit, when we're talking website, I think there's this big ambiguity of websites. Chris and I have kind of hammered into the different kind of classes of what you guys are working on a daily basis. But can you give us a little bit of a general breakdown of the different types of websites and where are these people generating their money, and then where and who are the potential buyers, and how are you kind of facilitating all that?
Sure. Great question. And, the industry has changed quite a bit since I started. When I started Quiet Light Brokerage, our I don't know if it was a slogan, but we just said we sell profitable and established websites. Well, today I would kind of broaden that out to talk about businesses, because it's much more difficult to have just a website that makes money. If you wanted to separate it into different categories, we would have your e-commerce. That would be one section. And e-commerce is something that I think most people are familiar with. You're selling products online, right? So you're selling wagons, or you're selling bikes, or you're selling basketball hoops, or industrial equipment, farm equipment, any sort of thing under the sun. And that typically is made up of a website, and then maybe you're selling on Amazon or Walmart.com or other marketplaces as well. And there's different avenues that you're making money and selling those products. And those can get quite complex. And there's lots of subcategories in the e-commerce realm. But you move away from the e-commerce realm, then you get into service-based businesses, which I would consider Quiet Light Brokerage to fall squarely into the service-based business. Web designers, web programmers, SEO optimizers, consultants of that nature, doing most of their business online. I would lump that together in a group. Then you have software as a service, which is a very popular and highly desirable niche to be in. Those would be online services that you pay a monthly fee or an annual fee to be a part of. And they provide some sort of online software. QuickBooks Online would be a software as a service, a very typical software as a service type company. Then you have content sites, which my first website, Site Reference, was a content site. And those usually focus on providing useful content and information to people who are looking for it. And you can monetize that through advertisements or through subscription or a paywall. And then you have other classified sites like online dating sites, which are just subscription sites as well. And then the last one, and I know this is quite a list, the last one I can think of off the top of my head would be lead generation sites, where you're selling leads. Think of like a mortgage rate request form or insurance form. There's tons of different lead generation companies out there. That would be another sector that we focus on.
It's so crazy interesting to me because, when you finally break this down, those are all businesses. And I love how you even said that you've revamped kind of your tagline, because those are all companies, right? They're very established businesses. There's not this, mystical unicorn stuff going on where it's this, person that's blogging about bikes in his basement that's just making millions of dollars for no reason. I mean, these are very viable businesses that have customers, and they're providing very concrete services to individuals. And I'm so interested in it because from talking to you and Chris, the traditional businesses and the online businesses are like colliding at rapid paces. And same thing with the metrics and how you're valuing them and what you're seeing under the hood.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's been a great maturation in the industry as well. When I started Quiet Light Brokerage in 2007, you did have those bloggers in the basement that just kind of stumbled into money. One of the first things that I did in the online world was, I don't know how to describe it easily, but I found a way to rank well in Google for lots and lots of key terms, right? And I spent 2 afternoons doing this, just kind of playing around with some things, threw up a whole bunch of sites, and was pulling in tens of thousands of dollars per month within 30 or 45 days. Those days are long, long gone. The internet has gone through lots of different changes. Google has penalized and taken out a lot of these people. There's still this kind of gray hat or black hat world that's out there. But it's nowhere near where it is, where it was 10 years ago. And what I would say is this: the people who are legitimately doing good work online, the bloggers out there, e-commerce companies out there, they have matured a lot, and they look a lot more like a traditional business than they did 10 years ago.
Well, because they have to, I mean, if all of a sudden you're making a bunch of money like that, you have to put together your financials. People are asking questions. I mean, you've got banks that are getting involved. I mean, you're having to do this stuff because you're now an established business. And then, you just, eventually mature. And it's so, and for our listeners too, the way to grow is online. So it's not just, throwing this SEO thing together and hopefully that works. Because, I mean, people are consuming and finding traditional businesses via the web, or via the web services now too. So they have to be able to understand this. And I think that there's a huge potential for traditional businesses to be able to get higher values for their company if they, transferable value, where they've got a system online, and maybe we can dive into some of the stuff that you've got on your resources online, but where are they getting their information from? So just to kind of give you a perfect example to break it down, so our old business, copier and IT sales. I knew that if I hired a $35,000 base pay sales rep within 18 months, they would be selling $30,000 a month in revenue. And I knew exactly how fast I would make that return, and it would be 400 phone calls, 15 proposals, three sales, and an average of this much margin. And it's a tried and true metric that we could go to the bank with. And that same metric and models are now available online because of all the tools that you can track. And then I'll kind of tee it up to you, because it's demystifying the Google Analytics and the traffic and where things are coming from, because instead of me having 15 sales reps at 35 grand to 70 grand base pay, you could take half of that money and provide the same system online.
Absolutely. I mean, the one of the great advantages of any online activity is the ability to track and provide advanced metrics. I mean, it's the metrics that you can get are extremely granular and highly predictive. So it's one of the big benefits. Being online, you're absolutely right.
Can you explain some of the metrics? I mean, just for our listeners, I'd say my average client goes, yeah, we should just throw up a website and see what happens if we get traffic. Or they do the opposite, which is they pay some Google paid per click guy 10 grand a month to drive traffic. Sure. So what are if you take my analog physical word of the calls and the appointments and stuff, what are some of the base, key metrics that people should be looking at?
I mean, it depends on the business. So let's talk about e-commerce business, because I think that's going to be most familiar to most people. You can take a look at cost per acquisition. How much does it cost from your marketing dollars? How much does it cost to acquire a single client or a single paid customer? You can take a look at your conversion rate. How many people are taking a look at your website before they actually buy a product, and what is the average value of that conversion rate? Those two statistics all around are extremely powerful on their own. Imagine this right now. This is a classic thing that we see buyers do when they buy an online business. They'll take a look at an online business and they'll see, okay, for every 100 visitors that come to this website, it's converting right now about one person into a sale, right? A 1% conversion rate. And they'll come in and they'll run different tests, and they'll realize, well, I can increase the conversion rate on this from 1 to maybe 3 or 4. Now, think about this from a revenue standpoint. You've just tripled or quadrupled your revenue with just that one thing. And the way that you do this is through is through split testing. And there's systems out there. Google provides their own, and there's lots of other tools out there where you can split test different types of pages to say this sort of checkout page has a much higher conversion rate than this conversion page 2. And there's lots of services out there. ClickFunnels.com is a classic place where you can take a look at increasing conversion rates on that. As far as other metrics are concerned, you can understand your repeat visitors. You can look at the average amount of time somebody's spending on the website. You can find out where they're abandoning the sales process. So maybe you have a 4-step checkout page or a 4-step sales process. You can find where people are leaving and saying, I don't want this. So the granular nature of the analytics is beyond anything that you're going to get in a traditional brick and mortar world.
Which, by the way, like take my old scenario. So I got 15 sales reps. 2/3 of them are not doing anything, or they're failing miserably, and they just go off into the abyss during the day, say whatever it is that they say to these potential clients or current clients, and then come back, and I have to trust whatever they're doing. Versus being able to actually see exactly where they are, these clients are in the funnels. And what's for our listeners who are trying to, really understand this world, what you're saying, like these key metrics, they're like you can track via it's the IP address and the computer. So when you talk about repeat visitors, you're actually able to have a very clear picture into this.
Yeah, and let me talk about 2 other things here, which I find to be both a little creepy, but also really powerful from just a business standpoint. Not only can you track when somebody comes back to your website, you can see what they're looking at and where their mouse is. And you can create a heat map on your site to see where are they spending most of their time on that. So you can see what's attracting the eyeballs, what's attracting their attention, and what's not. And you can modify that as well. And then secondly, the other technology that I think your listeners might find fascinating is you can talk to these people. For your analogy, you would have a sales rep go out and talk to somebody and then follow up with somebody. And then based on what that person is doing or what the response would be, hopefully that sales rep is intelligent enough to have a proper response. Well, from an email marketing standpoint, you can have a full funnel system set up, a full automation sequence set up where somebody signs up with you to receive an email maybe they get a free ebook or just a free product guide or something like that. And then an email gets sent out from you. It comes directly from you and they receive it. And based on their behavior and interaction with your website from there on out, you can have customized emails going out to them. And imagine this scenario. You have a client. They go through your sales process. They go through every step, and then they abandon the sale just before they're about to check out. And maybe you decide, well, maybe they just have buyer's regret. So you send them a coupon by email for 10% off within 5 minutes saying, hey, just thought I'd let you know, I wanted to give you a 10% off coupon. They don't know why they got it. They just know that they got this and they were really close to that decision point of possibly buying. You know that. And all of a sudden this comes up magically. So things like that, right? That's sort of the power of the analytics. Another common thing that I see subscription-based businesses do, right? You sign up for a subscription-based business and you're paying $30 a month. Well, from a business owner standpoint, I'm going to take a look at all those people paying $30 a month, and I'm going to see how long people stay on average. Maybe they stay 6 months, and so their average lifetime is about $180 of revenue to me. Well, when they sign up, what I might do is I might offer a one-time special only and say, hey, we're only going to offer this to you one time. But I'm going to give you lifetime access to this for $225. Now, what have I done? Right? I've increased my revenue by $45 there. So these are the sort of things that you can do from a marketing standpoint. It's really a marketer's dream. it's what it is. Oh
my gosh! I come growing up in the copier industry. I mean, we were a sales marketing. I mean, that's the whole industry. I mean, I bet you they employ. I mean, I'm totally just taking a guess. But it's got to be one of the top 3. Like where the salespeople go because of how many salespeople they employ. And take my old world where I'd have, my weekly full-blown sales huddles with my 15 sales reps and then the sales engineers, and then the midweek huddles with the half a team. And I have to trust my salespeople. Like, oh, why didn't they buy? Well, just cause. I'm like, that was the response. So it was. I mean, you're the bullshit filter as a sales manager, and that's all you do for a living. It's just
right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think out of interest of this conversation, the one thing that we see at Quiet Light Brokerage that's really encouraging. You talked about the marriage of the traditional business world with the online business world. We see that a lot. I mean, just people ask all the time, who buys these sites? Who buys these internet-based businesses? Well, a lot of the people that buy them come from the traditional brick and mortar world, and then they apply some of the basic principles from that world to online business, and it works beautifully. It works beautifully.
Well, it's point in case or perfect case of that is one of the systems we follow is called the Value Builder System by John Warlow. He wrote a book called Built to Sell. Our listeners are probably familiar with it. But one of the 8 key drivers of traditional value is growth. And you talked about your growth scenario of as being one of the 4 key things that you look at. And for the potential buyers or for when we're talking to business owners, one of the questions we ask them is how fast. Oh, sorry, let me rephrase this. Is if you could scale 5 times today, could you? And in the traditional, the service businesses, CPAs and law firms are probably the worst example because what would they have to do? They'd have to hire 5 times the amount of staff. When you think about what you talked about and how you could apply various metrics and just crank up the nozzle to scale it 4 times because of the metrics you got, you know exactly where to place your effort.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, hockey stick growth is a telltale sign of an internet-based business. I mean, there's still growth pains, and you still have to take that into consideration. I obviously talked a little bit about that with Site Reference when I had that. I could have grown that business much more had I taken fewer correct steps instead of just selling it. But so there still are growth pains, but it's not the same at all. I mean, you can definitely scale much faster online.
So what are the trends that you're seeing with these variety of e-commerce and online businesses? Where are they headed, and how are you? What's your opinion of you see the traditional and the online business converging? I mean, is there certain trends that you're seeing in the deals that you're doing?
Yeah, I'd say if we're talking e-commerce, the trend is away from reselling and towards developing your own brand. That's a very strong trend right now. A lot of that's being dictated by Amazon and by just the needs to stay competitive. When I started in 2007, if you wanted to have an e-commerce business, what you would do is you would find a wholesaler or a drop shipper. And they would send out just a product feed, which you could just throw up on a website, and you wouldn't have to do any updates. It would update for you automatically. And next thing you know, you'd be getting sales from that. Today, that model is all but dead. I mean, you can still do it, but it's not nearly what it was 10 years ago. Now, when I look at an e-commerce business, again, it looks so much more like a traditional business. They're often manufacturing their own product and having it come into the U.S. To various warehouses, and they use various ERP software to be able to track the shipments, and they have special fulfillment services set up. So a lot more traditional sort of self-made brands would be a strong trend that I'm seeing in the online world. Outside of that, SaaS, like I said before, or software as a service, and for any service-based company that's out there, if you can figure out how to turn your service into a software and use it online, it's such a lucrative model and such a great model to have. We're seeing that continuing to be a very, very strong trend, both from what buyers are looking for and also just desirable businesses to own.
So I totally agree with you. And I mean, everybody wants the golden ticket of the recurring revenue where the first of the month you wake up every time and your bank is full versus having to go collect it all and reinvent the wheel every month. As we were talking about these trends and you've mentioned, some traditional businesses buying the online businesses. If you're one of our listeners and you've got a traditional business and say any industry, because I think it's very applicable across industries, what would be the step that you would take? Because our listeners are trying to figure out how to grow the value of their business, how to stay relevant, but then also somewhere in the realm of transitioning, whether they're going to sell it or give it down or pass it on or whatever the situation might be. how can they leverage the online technology or the availability of businesses that you're working with to make their situation more lucrative or more appealing?
So let me see if I understand your question
Yeah,
correctly. So you have a traditional business that doesn't have any sort of web presence. You're wondering how can they leverage the internet, the power of the internet, and increase the value of their business?
well, yeah, I think that's. I'll maybe restate it. And we can go back to my personal example, which is so if I've got my old copier IT services business, and I'm looking at the next 5 years or plus, I'm not only want to keep growing the value of my business, looking possibly at transitioning. Is there a way where I could? Is it whether do I buy an online company? Because a lot of the traditional businesses just have a website. They've got some customers that interact with it free, every now and then, or they're posting stuff on social media, but there's no system behind it. How can traditional businesses that want to experience this stuff? What are some ways that they can leverage, possible companies that are for sale or things that they can do to bring themselves into this new world?
Well, sure. I mean, obviously, purchasing a business is a fast way to get into that world. So that would be one option. And as long as it's somewhat related to what they're doing, I wouldn't recommend purchasing something that isn't related at all to what they're currently doing. Other than that, I mean, it requires, again, thinking a little bit beyond just having a brochure website. And you see this a lot with internet-based, with traditional businesses, right? They'll put up a website, and like you said, they do some social media posting, and that's about it. You know what? I'll give you an example of something that I saw where maybe this can serve as some inspiration for this. I had to get my headshot taken for all the social media stuff and conferences, and one of the most painful events of my life. I hate having my photo taken and all that. But anyways,
Your smile looks natural, just so you know. It looks good.
Photoshop is wonderful. So, photographers, my sister's got a photography business, and this is the classic sort of very simple business, which is brochure based, right? You put up some photos online, and maybe you deliver the photos online to your clients, and that's about the extent that you use the internet. Well, this woman had a completely different approach. I went onto her website and inquired, and she said, absolutely, why don't you go ahead and book a time? Well, I ended up getting this series of emails from her, which was, here's a link to my calendar where I could pick any time I wanted to be able to come in. I could pay online. I could tell her exactly what I wanted to have done online. So all of the scheduling, all of the delivery, every process of the business was pretty much taken care of through an online system. What was left for her was taking the pictures and then uploading them and saying this job is done. And for her, I mean, that just relieved all that much more, all that headache and the busyness that would normally be associated with that sort of type of company. And so that's an example of thinking, how can you use the internet? How can you use the internet and a website to leverage your existing business? I'll give you another example. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm about to tell the story correctly. I heard this at a conference a few years ago, but there was a pool installation company, right? You don't get much more traditional than that. And what they did is they compiled a list of all the questions that their salespeople would get, and it was, I forget how many. It was a massive number of questions, but then they ended up just putting all that content online. And what happened was they started getting orders for pool installations without any pre-sales process. I mean, just imagine that, right?
You're buying a $30,000 pool online without talking to someone.
Exactly, because here's the fact: people like to interact online more than they like to interact with people. I hate to break it to all salespeople. I'm a salesperson. People don't like us, right? No one wants to talk to a salesperson. We're annoying sometimes, and more to the point, people don't want to be sold. People want to make up their mind for their own, and so the more that you can distance that and allow people to discover on their own, the more success that you're going to have. So absolutely. I think there's lots of ways that a business can leverage the internet. I don't think you necessarily have to buy a company, but I think what you can do is take a look at your own processes internally and understand that a lot of the processes that you're dealing with, especially when it comes to consumer-facing processes, can be handled online, and chances are your customers want that to happen.
Well, absolutely 100% believe everything you said with to the bottom of my heart, because I've been on both sides of that table, and it's weird because the purchases that I've made even for my own business, you're talking very high ticket items that I'd never even met someone and you're just like, it was way better because I was educated and I knew I wanted to buy, and I just needed to give them my credit card.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So, as we're kind of wrapping up here, a couple questions that I've got, as we're talking about the traditional businesses and, the purchase or build or all these different, how do you put these systems to place? I mean, when you talk about the skill sets that you need to put this in place, they're very unique because it's not the traditional IT manager or the traditional marketer who designs brochures. So, how do you turn that corner? Go back to your story. How do you turn the corner of getting into this world? Maybe it is just to buy something someone that's got a complimentary service and that wants an earn out, and you can integrate their services into yours, or is there a skill set that you could hire to help you do this? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Boy, great question, and I'll try and give a good answer to it, but it really is a good question. I think it's a tougher nut to crack than a simple 5-minute answer could produce. But all right, so let's talk about skill sets first of all. I find traditional business owners tend to do well in the online world because they aren't handcuffed by knowledge of the specifics of what they're supposed to do. And that might sound odd, but some of the best people that I've worked with, best buyers that I've worked with, had trouble operating email, but they knew how to hire and they knew systems and they knew what goals and end goals they wanted. I think if you understand that the online world is a business just like any other, that is comprised of specialist sort of positions, that's a place that I would start. So if you are a product based company and you're trying to sell products online, you need to see the elements that go in and know the elements that go into online based sales for selling products. And that would include paid search, or maybe an Amazon consultant, and then somebody who knows how to develop and build a website with certain goals in mind. If you're purely a marketer, you need to have some basic familiarity with the types of marketing that is done online, and then be able to hire for those positions as well. And again, break it up into what you're specifically looking to do. I don't know, Ryan, do you have like an example maybe that we could use?
I think you're answering it as clear as you can, because it's as clear as mud, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, I personally went through the same thing where there's what is marketing, what is sales, what's online. There's this big, huge cloud of smoke around all of it, because to hire someone that knows email automation and the systems behind that versus the Google Analytics and the Facebook tracking and all that stuff is, other than fully learning it yourself as a business owner, which is very intimidating. Finding the people that have the right skill sets, you have to have a basic understanding of this stuff to be able to hire it out. And it's kind of like when we were hiring our sales reps, we had to train them. We had to know what qualities we were looking for. But I don't know. I don't know if either of us are answering it. I think you'd probably nailed it a lot better than I did. But I agree where, business owners that are very skilled at running companies and systems and people and delegating have a huge opportunity to grow the value of their company and to make their business relevant today in a way that they have never had the opportunity before.
I think a way that we could think about this would be if you're thinking about it like a car. I don't know cars, right? What I know is I know I have an engine. I know the basics of how an engine works, very, very basics, and I know I have the drivetrain that goes to the wheels. If I need to have somebody specifically, like very particular specialist, work on it, I know that I'm going to want to hire somebody to work on that specific part of the car, if we're talking about specialists. From the standpoint of a business owner who's getting into the online world, you need to understand the basics of how the online world works. But it's not all this mystical sort of stuff. You can break it down into sort of the same thing that you would have for a traditional business. You have to have visitors. You have to have people looking at your site. And then you have to have some sort of process in the back end to be able to serve those visitors. And then you have to have your marketing as well to bring the visitors in or to bring them in again. As you start to drill down this sort of hierarchy of high level stuff into more detailed stuff, what you end up inevitably finding is that just like an engine, you can tweak certain parts of it. So marketing automation with email, that falls under this big umbrella of marketing. And it's not going to be right for every business, but you can break down and think about the big questions of, I need to get people to my site, right? Or my business needs more people to come to the website. We've got systems in place. We figured that part out. We need to be able to get people to the website. All right. So how do we do that? Well, let's see first how many people are coming in. So that'd be our tracking. And let's talk about how we can get them in. Maybe email is a great way to go, and maybe we can kind of work them through this funnel. Now you need marketing automation, and you need to learn the basics of that. And then you hire somebody with the goal in mind. And this would be the big, I guess the big point I would make would be understand your goal first and work backwards from there. You don't need to know how to set up an email marketing automation campaign. There are specialists out there who do this for a living, and you can hire them and then give them the goals and let them reach the goals.
I love it. I think that's very good advice. I really do, because instead of just trying to hire someone to find out what the goal is, that's a lot of wasted time and money.
Yeah, I mean, people will tell you all sorts of things, and they'll tell you whatever is their specialty, right? So
right.
they'll tell you, oh, this is what I do. You should really have this. Well, no, you're the business owner. Figure out what your goals are. Yep. Obviously, it starts with more revenue, more earnings. But I can tell you for myself, like with Quiet Light Brokerage, our goal is obviously to sell more businesses, but that's kind of an ambiguous goal. How do you do that? And so I've identified for Quiet Light Brokerage, our goal is actually to have conversations. And I can give a direct correlation between the number of conversations we have per year and the amount of business that we do. And so our goal is, how many conversations can we have with business owners? That's again, still high level, but then we can start breaking down, okay, what sort of conversations do we have? Where do we have these conversations? And then that dictates from there what our marketing strategy is. So for example, I use marketing automation where we send out, like, how do you sell an Amazon business? And people get an email from us. And all that email is set up to do is to say, hey, why don't you give us a call and talk to us about this, right? And that's my goal. Then I'm reaching that specific goal of having a conversation.
I think that's great advice. If there was one thing that we talked about that you want to reemphasize, I know we talked about a lot. Is there anything you want to kind of highlight for our listeners?
If there's one thing I would say, that I think you actually were the one that talked mostly about this, but I think it's very, very true, and that is the coming marriage, or I mean, it's happening right now, the marriage of the online and offline worlds. I'm going to have to double check this, and if so, you can send out a correction if I'm wrong. But I believe Target stores this year reported a significant drop in their revenue from the Christmas season, but their online store went up significantly. And we're seeing this with lots of brick and mortar stores, lots of traditional businesses. Their online presence is growing. Now, I can tell you from just experience, I've dealt with companies and business owners who had a retail store and they started up a website on the side. And next thing you know, that website was taking up 70-80% of the revenue, and they wondered why they had a physical store in the first place.
I've heard that story before too.
Right? And I think, I have to staff this store 7 days a week, but my website I don't have to. Why am I even having a physical store? That marriage is happening, and it's going to continue to happen. And for people that are coming from the traditional business world, you don't have to get rid of the lessons. Those lessons that you have and the things that you've learned and the business acumen that you've developed is extraordinarily valuable in the online world. If you apply those to the online world, there's a ton of upside.
I absolutely love it. Mark, what if our listeners want to get in touch with you? What's the best way?
You can email me, mark@quietlightbrokerage.com, or contact us through our website. Or there's a number on our website as well that you can call as well.
Perfect. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks.